No country in Latin America and the Caribbean has been hit as hard by the novel coronavirus as Ecuador, where official figures on cases and fatalities continue to fall far short of the reality. The UN Secretary-General has stressed that the only credible response to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change is brave, visionary and collaborative leadership anchored in multilateralism. The World Health Organization has warned that malaria deaths could double during the coronavirus pandemic if efforts are not urgently scaled up. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. No country in Latin America and the Caribbean has been hit as hard by the novel coronavirus as Ecuador. Brazil, a far larger country, may have more COVID-19 cases, but Ecuador's death toll is thought to be twice as high as Brazil's. And no place in Ecuador has suffered as much as the port city of Guayaquil. Our correspondent in Ecuador, Denise Herrera, brings us the details.
President Lenin Moreno recently announced that Ecuador is ready to reopen some activities in the country. According to the government, now are the local authorities the responsible of making this new decision. The government said that the COVID-19 statistic shows that Ecuador is controlling the pandemic, so they are saying that the COVID-19 cases are decreasing in the country. Most of the mayors of Ecuador have rejected this new announcement. They said that Ecuador is not ready to reopen some activities, and they are also recommending that Ecuador must to continue with the isolation. In this context, the indigenous movement, the CONAIE, have rejected also this new announcement. They said that they didn't receive any government help and they are making their own decisions to stop with the spread of the COVID-19 in their territories. According to the government, Ecuador has around 24,600 cases of the new coronavirus and 883 people have died because of this new virus. But the government are also including a new number of victims of the COVID-19. They said that around 1,300 people have died probably because of this new virus.
A group of Venezuelans attempting to return to their home country has been stranded for 3 days along the northern highway of the Colombian capital, Bogotá. Some 12 buses are parked on the highway, waiting for authorization to proceed across the border. In the absence of a response from Colombian authorities, the Venezuelan citizens are demanding that President Ivan Duque and Bogotá Mayor Claudia Lopez activate a humanitarian corridor so they can proceed to Venezuela without any obstacles. Experts have warned that the longer they are stranded, the greater the risk of COVID-19 infection, precisely the reason why these Venezuelan citizens want to return to their home country, escaping the spread of the virus in Colombia. Colombian authorities have so far reported over 6,000 COVID-19 cases and 278 deaths. During the daily COVID-19 briefing, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez reported that over the last few hours, 2 new cases were identified, taking a total to 331.
Out of 331 total cases, the number of people who have recovered is 142, which represents 42.9%. Then we have 89 patients in surveillance hospitals, 66 patients in comprehensive diagnostic centers. There are 24 patients hospitalized in private clinics, and, well, the unfortunate figure of 10 people who have died from COVID-19.
Russian representatives to the UN have reiterated condemnation of US attempts to use the coronavirus pandemic to pressure the Venezuelan government. Deputy Ambassador of Russia to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky, questioned the UN decision to discuss Venezuela in the context of the coronavirus, while the situation is far worse in neighbouring countries. Polyansky reminded the international community that the US and several European countries have frozen $9 billion worth of Venezuelan funds, money which could be spent on purchasing equipment and medicines abroad. Polyansky condemned the extraterritorial US sanctions, as well as threats and blackmail, as gross violations of international law. The Brazilian Ministry of Health this Tuesday reported 474 new COVID-19 deaths, representing a record daily toll. Brazil has now seen more than 5,000 fatalities and over 74,000 cases, making it the worst-hit country in Latin America. According to the Health Ministry itself, the actual number of deaths could be even higher than the official data, as the results of tests to determine the cause of more than 1,000 suspected COVID-19 deaths are pending. Meanwhile, the government of Jair Bolsonaro decided to extend the ban on foreigners entering the country by air for a further 30 days, amid strong criticism of the president's handling of the health crisis. And meanwhile, Brazil's Supreme Court has suspended President Jair Bolsonaro's controversial appointment of Alexandre Ramagem as the new federal police chief. Ramagem is a close friend of the Bolsonaro family, sparking concern that he would give them undue preferential treatment at a time when two of the president's sons are reportedly under investigation by the federal police. The ruling came after a request by the Democratic Labour Party, which claimed Bolsonaro is trying to interfere in investigations that affect him personally. Bolivia's Chamber of Deputies is debating a bill giving the green light to hold presidential elections. Deputies are debating the bill drafted by the Supreme Electoral Court, proposing that general elections initially scheduled for May 3rd and suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic be held sometime between June 28th and September 27th this year. These will be the first elections after the coup against former President Evo Morales in November last year. Prisoners across Peru have protested and rioted to demand health guarantees amid the COVID-19 epidemic. Riots were staged in several prisons on Monday and Tuesday following the deaths of several inmates infected with the novel coronavirus. 9 prisoners were killed in the riots, according to local authorities. Peru's overcrowded jails have been hit hard by the coronavirus, which has killed at least 13 prisoners, while more than 500 have been infected. Peru has confirmed over 31,000 COVID-19 cases, the second highest number in the Latin American region after Brazil. Meanwhile, health authorities have reported 854 fatalities. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres stressed on Tuesday during the virtual Petersburg Climate Dialogue that the only credible response to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change is brave, visionary and collaborative leadership anchored in multilateralism.
The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the fragility of all societies and economies to global shocks, such as disease or climate disruption. As we recover, we must build back better for people and the planet. We have the guides and tools we need, the Paris Agreement on climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals. Together, we can improve health, reduce inequalities, and re-energize struggling economies.
The United States has by far the world's largest number of confirmed coronavirus cases at more than 1 million, while the death toll has topped 60,000. Amid rising pressures to boost testing capacity, health officials have stressed the challenge of getting tests to those who need them most. According to infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci, part of the White House coronavirus task force, a second round of the coronavirus is inevitable. Fauci said the federal government needs to provide strategic guidance and assistance to help states up their number of conducted tests. He claimed everyone in need of a virus test should be able to get one by the end of May or the beginning of June. Spain's health ministry announced that more than 50% of people infected with the novel coronavirus in the country have recovered. This Wednesday marks the 6th consecutive day that the number of fatalities has been below 400 in Spain, while the number of confirmed cases is now over 236,000.
We passed the peak. We are bending the curve, and precisely the best way to visualize the point at which we are is to put in value that more than 50% of the people who have been infected in our country by coronavirus, I insist more than 50% have already recovered in Spain. We are about to begin, and Prime Minister said it yesterday, a new phase, a complex phase, don't forget that, a very difficult one that is going to demand to all of us the best of ourselves, but we have reasons to have hope and to feel capable of getting it.
pero tenemos razones para la esperanza, para sentirnos.
Portuguese troops have joined forces with secondary schools to prepare for the possible resumption of classes in May. Teams from the Portuguese Army and Navy wearing protective suits and masks sprayed a classroom on Wednesday as a demonstration of what kind of procedures are ready to be activated to continue to control the spread of the novel coronavirus. The teams are part of a strategy aiming to provide training to school workers to perform more thorough daily cleaning of learning spaces. The Portuguese government ordered the closure of all schools in mid-March. As China gradually returns to normal following the coronavirus outbreak, it was announced on Wednesday that the previously postponed annual session of the National People's Congress will be held in late May. 3,000 deputies will meet in Beijing to discuss problems, policies and laws to be implemented over the next year. The Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference will also meet. Its 2,000 delegates represent civil society and offer advice to Congress and the ruling party on how to improve national policy. The double session is expected to be held under strict health controls as prevention measures are still in place in Beijing, with visitors to the city undergoing COVID-19 tests and 2 weeks of quarantine on arrival. The postponement of the annual session was the first in 20 years. As Europe and the US struggle with COVID-19 outbreaks, Vietnam has all but beaten the coronavirus. Vietnam has now gone 5 days straight without reporting any new confirmed cases of COVID-19 and nearly 2 weeks without any local transmissions. Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc said on Tuesday that the country had the pandemic under control. Vietnam has reported a total of just 270 COVID-19 cases, of whom 222 have recovered, while no fatalities have been recorded. According to local media, Vietnam has conducted more than 200,000 coronavirus tests. And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The novel coronavirus pandemic could severely disrupt access to anti-malarial nets and drugs in sub-Saharan Africa. The World Health Organization has warned that malaria deaths could double during the coronavirus pandemic if efforts are not urgently scaled up. In the West African nation of Benin, health authorities are occupied with the risks associated with the novel coronavirus, but still careful not to lose sight of other deadly diseases such as malaria. A new campaign of door-to-door distribution of free mosquito nets is aiming to deliver 8 million to around 3.2 million households in vulnerable areas.
Our neighborhood is a 60% low-land area, which means that practically 8 months out of 12 we've got water. Hence, the importance of sleeping 12 months out of 12 in mosquito nets and, as we often say, insecticide-treated mosquito nets to ensure everyone's health. We chose this moment, otherwise it couldn't take place because of the arrival of COVID-19. But the rainy season is about to start here, and we know that it's at this time that malaria cases are on the rise, and the mosquito nets are there to prevent mosquitoes from biting us. It's a means of preventing malaria.
And the polio vaccination campaign in Africa has been put on hold due to the coronavirus pandemic, sparking warnings of fresh outbreaks. Vaccinations for up to 12 million children in Africa will be delayed due to a major redeployment of polio eradication resources to fight the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Dr. Pascal Makanda, the World Health Organization's coordinator of polio eradication in Africa, polio prevention campaigns will be suspended until at least the second half of 2020. While noting that the decision will inevitably lead to a rise in polio cases, the WHO officials said they took the difficult decision to suspend plans in order to tackle COVID-19. Djibouti has seen a rapid spike in coronavirus cases to record the highest prevalence in the African continent. The tiny but strategically important country that hosts major US and French military bases recorded over 900 positive cases on Tuesday, the highest in East Africa. With a population of about 1 million, Djibouti has conducted more than 10,000 COVID-19 tests. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention noted that with 98.6 cases per 100,000 people, the country has the highest prevalence on the continent. The rate of multiplication is alarming, as in just 2 weeks, Djibouti has reported a 7-fold increase in cases. The country has now reported over 1,000 cases and 2 fatalities. 10 more people in Kenya have tested positive for the novel coronavirus, taking the total number of confirmed cases to 384, while 14 people have died.
We are synthesizing. We are noting that in the beginning of this scourge, we had most of the cases being imported cases, but right now the tables have turned and most of our cases are coming from local transmission within our communities. And so our containment measures are quite crucial at this point.
South Africa this week announced an increase in social grants for the poor, elderly and disabled. Social Development Minister Lindimwe Sulu said a social relief distress grant would be paid between May and October. It will be available to South Africans, refugees and permanent residents already in the Department of Home Affairs system and those residing within the borders of South Africa. The details of the R350 grant to help unemployed people not receiving any form of subsidy or grant during the COVID-19 outbreak were revealed on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Minister Sulu said the government was also distributing food parcels to more than 58,000 households, or close to 250,000 people, using its existing community nutrition centre network. She has asked the private sector, which is helping to provide food, to work with communities to help those most in need. And volunteers in South Africa's Cape Town are going door to door, making sure that those in need are not going hungry while the country battles the coronavirus outbreak. More in the following report.
Since the national lockdown started in late March, thousands of volunteers have been lifting their hands for duty, giving up their own time as part of a collective fight to feed as many vulnerable people on the Cape Flats. For author and activist Griselda Godbroom, it's a strong sense of civic duty that brought her to Khayelitsha, an informal township and one of the Cape Town's virus epicenters.
Very important for us to come out and serve our communities, and where it's time for us to also show what is the serving of communities, because usually our communities see people on TV, they see people's work on TV, and for us to come close and finally come door to door and give out these food parcels, it's very important. It gets relevant.
It's a story many volunteers are relating to, as everyone contributes to efforts while facing the COVID-19 crisis. Even the elderly and the young are making sure their community gets fed. Some volunteers do this while their own future remains uncertain.
Being in the hospitality industry, we work crazy hours. We always at work, like day in and day out. So now, because of the lockdown, I've got nothing to do with my time. So I thought, why not giving something back to the community? You know, come and volunteer, help out. There's a lot of people that are suffering a lot. I'm also suffering. The whole world is suffering. But there are people that actually didn't even have jobs. That won't get UIF. They won't get leave money.
Volunteers of just about every sector of society are giving up their time and working alongside the government, NGOs and communities to make sure that nobody gets left behind in these difficult times. Even though lockdown regulations will be slowly eased, their work will remain just as important. After recording 75 COVID fatalities, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Thursday said the country would gradually start easing lockdown restrictions from May 1st.
The Arab League said Monday it will convene an urgent virtual meeting this week to discuss how to galvanise opposition to Israeli plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. The extraordinary meeting, scheduled for Thursday at the request of the Palestinian leadership, will bring together Arab foreign ministers via video conference due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Arab League's Deputy Secretary General, Hossam Saki, said the ministers will discuss providing political, legal and financial support to the Palestinian leadership to confront the Israeli plans. The virtual meeting comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz signed a deal for a unity government that could accelerate plans to annex parts of the West Bank in the coming months. April 29th is International Dance Day, offering an opportunity to pay tribute to those who have chosen this form of expression to overcome all kinds of cultural and political barriers. And we finish this news brief with a video to celebrate dance and diversity. Remember, you can get all the latest news on our website as well as by following us on social media. For Telly's English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching, and why not have a dance?
da dun dun da dun da dun da dun da dun da du du di da la da dun dengat da la da dun dengat da dun dun ba dun dege dun dege dun dege da dun bara la da dun dengat bara la da dun dengat bara la da dun dengat da dun dengat du 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 di bara la da dun dengat